a universe where interplanetary empires dominate entire galaxies, where advanced technologies bend space-time and vanished civilizations leave behind only warnings etched in crystal runes. Now, imagine that at the center of it all lies a small, blue, and seemingly insignificant planet called Earth. A planet that, according to all legends and records, must be avoided at all costs. Why? What is so dangerous about a place filled with tribal wars, cat videos, and waffles? The answer is not what you expect. Earth does not harbor an apocalyptic weapon or a cosmic monster. It is something far more powerful, a barrier, a shield that maintains balance across the multiverse. And humanity, with its unique ability to laugh at chaos and embrace the absurd, holds the key to everything. But what happens when an alien fleet, driven by arrogance and curiosity, decides to ignore the final galactic warning? Prepare for a journey that will challenge your perception of reality. A story where memes are weapons, waffles are tools of diplomacy, and the fate of the universe hinges on a simple Waffle House in Nebraska. This is your final warning. Don't mess with Earth. Because in the end, chaos is not the problem. It's the solution. The galaxy, in that era of interplanetary empires, was a tapestry of lights and secrets. The Galactic Council, an entity that ruled star systems with an iron fist covered in velvet gloves, maintained absolute control over its domains. Technologies for space folding, machines that tore through space-time, and weapons capable of evaporating entire planets. All of this was trivial to them. But there was one region, a single forbidden zone that even the proudest emperors dared not mention. A blank space on the maps, a silence in the records, and at the center of this void, a blue-green planet orbiting an inconsequential yellow star, Earth. The warning was everywhere. In the ruins of vanished civilizations, on the walls of floating cities swallowed by black holes, in the dead languages of extinct species. "Do not disturb Earth," the inscription said, some written in cosmic blood, others engraved in black diamonds. Archaeologist XYX, a being whose mind shone like a beacon amidst the fog of time, had spent centuries deciphering these warnings. His discoveries were clear: 18 fallen empires, all destroyed after ignoring the same alert. But what lay there? A weapon, an entity. The lords of the Galactic Council laughed. How could a primitive world, full of tribal wars and cat videos, threaten empires that had bent space-time? Arrogance was a digital virus, more contagious than any meme. They decided to send a fleet, not to conquer, but to observe. After all, curiosity was the mother of all traps. Preparations were made in secret. Reconnaissance ships, equipped with cosmic distortion shields, approached the solar system. The route avoided Jupiter. Something in the ancient data mentioned that the gas giant had strange habits. But the real target was Earth. The sensors captured images of illuminated cities, blue oceans, and breathing forests. Everything seemed normal. So normal it was unsettling. Then the first reports arrived. Something was wrong with the transmissions. Data was corrupting. Holograms flickered with images of furry creatures called cats, and encoded messages appeared on the panels. "You are being watched. Abandon the forbidden zone." The Council's scientists exchanged glances. Was it a virus, a psychic weapon, or something worse? XYX, in his lab ship, studied fragments of an artifact found in Orion. The object, a corroded metal capsule, contained recordings of an extinct race. "They do not fight with weapons," the recorded voice whispered, full of static. "They fight with ideas, memes, chaos." The archaeologist felt a chill run through his bioluminescent vertebrae. Perhaps humanity was not the threat, but the antidote. Meanwhile, the fleet advanced. The space around Earth trembled, as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled by invisible hands. A lieutenant reported, "Sir, Jupiter is blinking." The commander ignored it. Focus on the objective. But the sensation that they were being watched grew, not by humans, but by something greater, something that used Earth as bait. In the command center, the admirals debated. "What if it's an illusion?" one asked. "What if the forbidden zone is not a barrier, but a warning. No one answered. The data showed anomalies, unstable wormholes, particles that defied the laws of physics, and a background music that no one could identify. Was it jazz? Or the sound of a Waffle House at midnight? The tension was palpable. The crew began to have nightmares. They dreamed of Nebraska, a place not found on any star map, and of a man with a badge reading management who served endless coffee. When they woke up, they scribbled equations on the walls, trying to solve quantum paradoxes that made no sense. Sanity slipped away like sand between fingers. At the last moment before entering Earth's orbit, archaeologist XYX sent an urgent message. Stop, it's a trap. Earth is not what it seems. But it was too late. The sensors blared alarms. Space-time folded, Jupiter blinked again, and all screens displayed a single word, repeated in every known language. Welcome. The Galactic Council fleet hovered at the edge of the solar system, their ships shining like silver needles against the void. The sensors whispered contradictory data. Earth was there, but it wasn't. It was as if the planet danced between dimensions, a cosmic mirage. Commander Dr. Zeal, a being of pulsing plasma, ordered caution. We advance, but keep cosmic distortion shields active, he said, ignoring the fact that even the laws of physics seemed to hesitate there. Then Jupiter acted. The gas giant, until then merely a backdrop, blinked. Its great red spot closed like a cosmic eye, reopening with an amber glow. Crew members from 3 different species reported hallucinations. They saw the planet as a living entity, watching them. It's not possible, murmured a scientist, her antennae trembling. Planets don't have consciousness, unless, of course, something granted them consciousness. The space around Earth began to vibrate. It wasn't a physical vibration, but a perceptual one, as if reality was being reprojected in real time. Navigation holograms showed distorted images. The moon spun backward, Mars vanished and reappeared covered in forests, and Venus. Venus emitted a high-pitched laugh. Collective illusion? Questioned an officer, holding his head with restless tentacles. Or are we seeing layers of the multiverse? Then the systems of the ships failed. Panels displayed cats wearing party hats, texts in dead languages saying 404, reality not found, and an entity named Shrek, dancing in a loop. It's a digital virus, shouted the chief engineer, deleting corrupted files. But the memes replicated faster, infiltrating even the quantum cores. A message flickered. You should have brought coffee. As chaos unfolded, a primitive radio transmission reached the fleet. It was a relaxed human voice, humming along to, Never Gonna Give You Up. Is this an auditory attack? Dr. Zeal asked, bewildered. No, whispered ZX, recognizing the pattern. It's a joke. They rickrolled us. The idea that a civilization used humor as defense was as absurd as it was terrifying. Suddenly, all the screens went dark. A symbol appeared, a low building glowing with yellow neon, with flickering red letters spelling out Waffle House. Coordinates appeared below, pointing to Nebraska. An invitation? The commander wondered. Or a trap? ZX laughed, something he hadn't done in centuries. For humans, it's the same thing. The fleet hesitated, but curiosity outweighed fear. They landed in a cornfield under a rust-colored sky. The place was mundane, a roadside diner with syrup-stained tables and the smell of burnt bacon. Inside, a disheveled man in a suit waited, his name tag gleaming with the word management. His coffee was steaming, eternally hot. Have a seat, he said, as if welcoming old friends. Let's talk about balance. The aliens exchanged glances. How could an ordinary human overlook their cosmic nature? You want to know why Earth is off limits? He continued, chewing on a waffle. It's not because of our weapons. It's because we understand that reality is flexible. He pointed to a cat sleeping on the counter. Videos of him save universes. Seriously, Dr. Zeal interrupted. This is insane. The man smiled. Exactly. You try to control space-time, but we play with it. When a quantum paradox arises, we post memes. When a cosmic distortion threatens, we have a barbecue, and that keeps everything running. A screen behind him displayed numbers, 73% of universal stability linked to dance virals. Before they could question further, the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake, it was something bigger. The sky split open, revealing a void filled with eyes. "Ah, right," the man said, raising his coffee. "Forgot to ask. Did you bring friends?" The fleet looked up, and for the first time in millennia, Dr. Zeal felt something rare. Pure fear. The Waffle House in Nebraska wasn't just a place, it was a state of mind. Neon lights flickered over cracked plastic tables, the air thick with grease and cheap syrup. The aliens, used to floating cities and palaces of pure energy, felt out of place. "Is this a joke?" hissed a translucent-skinned crew member, stepping onto the sticky floor. Dr. Zeal, however, recognized the danger. Common places are the best hiding spots for cosmic secrets. The man from management was already waiting for them. His suit seemed to have survived a dimensional war, and his coffee, always hot, always full, defied thermodynamics. "Greetings, travelers," he said, as if he were serving regular customers. "Did you know the multiverse spins around an axis called Nebraska?" No one laughed. He sighed. "Tough crowd today." As the aliens settled into uncomfortable booths, the man explained. Earth, despite its wars and cat videos, was the pillar of cosmic stability. "You see chaos? We see balance," he said, pointing to a photo on the wall. It was an old meme. A cat with the caption, "Icon has quantum paradox." This right here, he tapped the counter, saved 3 realities from collapsing in the last decade. Dr. Zeal, whose plasma body glowed with skepticism, questioned, "How can memes affect space-time?" The man smiled, serving waffles that never cooled. "Think of memes as antibodies. When an anomaly arises, a selfish black hole, a quantum paradox, humanity creates a joke, and laughing at it neutralizes the danger." XYX, the archaeologist, furiously took notes. "Civilization that laughs at the apocalypse, shock immune to it." A static screen behind the counter came to life. It showed the Galactic Council fleet, hours earlier, being invaded by digital cats. "That was just a warning," the man said. "If they wanted war, they would have sent TikToks." Dr. Zeal blinked, confused. "And what is TikTok?" The man laughed. "Better not to know. Even we are afraid of it." The conversation then shifted to the forbidden zone. "It's not that Earth is dangerous," the man explained. "It's that outside of it is the problem." He opened a holographic portal showing the multiverse. Infinite Earths, some covered in atomic mushrooms, others ruled by ducks. "Our reality is the only one where chaos is controlled, because we embrace it." A crew member murmured, "Is this philosophy or madness?" "Both," the man replied seriously. "Civilizations that have vanished try to order chaos. You from the Council try to control it with technology. We have barbecues at the end of the world." To demonstrate, he turned on a tube TV. The channel showed humans dancing in hurricanes, laughing at alien invasions, and posting selfies with asteroids. "Accepting the absurd is the only defense against it," he concluded. It was then that the ground trembled, not from earthquakes, but from something beyond. The walls of the Waffle House dissolved, revealing a void filled with glowing eyes. "Oh, great," the man said, peering into the darkness. "I think someone forgot to close the necessary chaos portal." Dr. Zeal raised an energy hand. "Is this our fault?" "Of course not," laughed the man, adjusting his name tag. "It's just Tuesday." Before they could react, he tossed coffee into the portal. The liquid bubbled, forming a cosmic filter that sealed the breach. "See? Coffee solves everything." The aliens looked at each other, questioning whether they were dreaming or if reality was truly this flexible. As they left, the man handed each of them a wrapped waffle. "Keep this. When the multiverse starts to collapse, just toast it and eat." Dr. Zeal, now less skeptical, asked, "And if it doesn't work?" The man shrugged. "Then you post a meme. It worked for us." The fleet departed, taking with them not answers, but new questions, and the lingering smell of cheap syrup. The revelation echoed in the minds of the aliens like a cosmic gong. As the Waffle House returned to normalcy, if normalcy even existed there. Dr. Zeal stared at the management man. "Are you saying Earth is a lightning rod for the multiverse?" The man smiled, flipping a pancake in the air. "More or less. Think of us as that person who holds the elevator door for everyone to get in. Only instead of a door, it's a black hole full of paradoxes." HFY, the archaeologist, was studying a star map scratched onto a napkin. "The lost civilizations. They tried to fight against chaos, didn't they?" The man nodded. "Exactly. The more you struggle against uncertainty, the more it consumes you. Us? We embrace it. Like that time a digital virus tried to wipe out the internet, and humans responded with memes of ducks wearing party hats." Dr. Zeal blinked, bewildered. "And did it work?" "It worked so well," the man laughed, "that the virus gave up and became a social media influencer." The aliens exchanged glances. Human logic was like a labyrinth without an exit, or without the need for one. Meanwhile, a TV in the background was playing a documentary about how cat videos prevented a nuclear war in the 2020s. The caption read, "Purring calms even quantum fissures." Dr. Zeal, still skeptical, asked, "What if chaos gets out of control?" The man pointed out the window. Outside, a storm was forming, but instead of lightning, it threw emojis into the sky. "See? Even the weather here understands balance. If the storm gets too angry, someone posts a picture of a rainbow and everyone moves on." A crew member murmured, "Is this magic?" The man corrected him. "No, it's Nebraska." The conversation shifted to space-time. "How do you deal with cosmic distortions?" HFY asked, fascinated. The man opened an app on his phone. "We have an app called Reality Puzz. When a paradox appears, we choose ignore, post a meme, or call management." The screen displayed statistics. 89% of users opted to post a meme. "That works better than plasma shields," he said proudly. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council fleet was facing its own chaos. The once spotless ships now had walls plastered with posters of Baby Yoda and messages like, "Kisses, Earth 3. "Is this an invasion?" shouted an engineer, trying to peel off a sticker of an astronaut cat. Dr. Zeal sighed. "No, it's human diplomacy." The man from management then revealed the deepest secret. "The universe isn't stable, it's elastic. We stretch it here and there, but never to the breaking point." To demonstrate, he stretched a waffle until it turned into a miniature wormhole. "See? Just don't be afraid to break it." A crew member tried to replicate it, but his waffle turned to dust. "You all need practice," the man laughed. The discussion reached its climax when an alarm sounded. A cosmic fissure was opening over Texas, sucking everything nearby. "Ah, just another Tuesday," the man said, checking his watch. "Management sends their regards." He pressed a button under the counter, and a toaster launched hot bread directly into the fissure. The bread glowed, the breach closed, and the smell of butter filled the air. "Whole grain bread. Classic." Dr. Zeal, now converted, asked, "How can we help?" The man handed him a business card. "Spread memes, laugh at paradoxes, and for the love of space-time, never take a black hole that tells jokes seriously." ZUX took notes, but a question lingered. What would happen if the Galactic Council failed to embrace chaos? Before they left, the man whispered, "Oh, and if you see something called TikTok, run." The fleet took off, leaving Nebraska behind. But on the control screens, a message flashed. "Next stop, the final dilemma. Choose wisely." The Galactic Council fleet left Earth with more questions than answers. As the ships traversed space-time, Dr. Zeal reflected on what he had learned. "Chaos isn't the enemy," he murmured, watching a cat video that had inexplicably appeared on his screen. "It's the tool." Guy X, beside him, studied an old meme. A dog on fire saying, "This is fine." Maybe humanity discovered something we, in our quest for order, overlooked. The fleet's sensors began picking up anomalies. Wormholes opened and closed like doors at a cosmic party. Quantum paradoxes appeared like uninvited guests, but instead of panic, the crew laughed. One even posted a picture of a black hole with the caption, "When you see the lunch bill." The meme went viral instantly. and the black hole disappeared. "It worked!" cheered a young scientist. Dr. Zeal called for a meeting. "Humanity has shown us that chaos is necessary. But how do we apply this on a galactic scale?" HFY suggested, "Maybe we need our own management." The idea was accepted, and soon a team was formed to study Earth's memes. They discovered that each joke, each funny video, was a small correction in the structure of the universe. "It's like laughter is the source code of reality," said a programmer, amazed. Meanwhile, the fleet was approaching Jupiter. The gas giant blinked again, but this time it seemed friendly. "It's watching us," whispered a crew member. "Or maybe it's just posting something on Facebook," joked another. The atmosphere of fear that had once dominated the mission had transformed into a light, almost carefree curiosity. It was as if humanity had infected the fleet with its peculiar way of viewing the universe. However, not everything was memes and laughter. An urgent message arrived. A cosmic distortion was forming near Saturn. "It's too big to ignore," HFY warned. Dr. Zeal, drawing inspiration from what he had learned, ordered, "Prepare the memes," and the fleet launched a series of funny images, everything from a sneezing panda to a dancing alien, directly at the distortion. To everyone's surprise, it began to dissipate. "It worked!" shouted the team, celebrating. But Dr. Zeal knew it wasn't that simple. Chaos is a necessity, but also a risk, he reflected. If we lose control, the multiverse could collapse. HFY agreed. We need balance, like Earth does. The idea that such a chaotic planet could be the model of stability was ironic, but undeniably true. The fleet then received a new invitation, a transmission from Earth showing a Waffle House in Nebraska. This time, the man from management appeared with a new badge, Coordinator of Paradoxes. "Hey everyone," he said, holding up a waffle. "We need help. Someone forgot to close the necessary chaos portal, and now we have a fun problem." The screen showed a giant cosmic fissure from which dancing creatures and clouds of cotton candy emerged. Dr. Zeal looked at his team. "Shall we help?" The answer was unanimous. Yes. The fleet set off toward Earth, but this time not as explorers or conquerors. They were participants. The universe, after all, wasn't a puzzle to be solved, but a joke to be shared. As they traveled, a final message appeared on the screens. "Remember, chaos isn't the end. It's the beginning." And sometimes the beginning comes with waffles. The Galactic Council fleet arrived on Earth with a new purpose. They were no longer distant observers, but active participants in a cosmic game they barely began to understand. Dr. Zeal, now wiser and a bit more human, despite his plasma body, led the team to the Waffle House in Nebraska. The man from management was waiting for them, this time with a new badge, Coordinator of Paradoxes and hot coffee. "Welcome back," he said, serving waffles that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "We need help closing a portal that's, well, leaking." The screen behind him displayed a giant cosmic fissure from which dancing creatures and clouds of cotton candy emerged. "It's necessary chaos," he explained, "but in triple doses." Dr. Zeal looked at HFY, who was furiously taking notes. "And how do we do that?" The man smiled. "With memes, of course." He opened an old laptop covered in cat and alien stickers. "Each of you will create a meme. Something that makes you laugh but also makes you think. Like a black hole wearing sunglasses or a quantum paradox doing stand-up." The aliens hesitated. "We don't know how to make memes," Dr. Zeal admitted. The man laughed. "Relax, just follow your heart and avoid dad jokes." As the team worked, the portal grew. Bizarre creatures began to emerge. A tentacled unicorn, a cloud singing, "Never gonna give you up," and a duck insisting on discussing philosophy. "This is getting serious," HFY whispered, trying to lasso the duck with a light rope. "Serious? Or funny?" the man replied, posting a photo of the unicorn on Facebook. Inspired, Dr. Zeal created his first meme, an image of Jupiter winking, with the caption, "When you see something, you shouldn't." The meme was launched directly into the portal, and to everyone's surprise, the fissure began to shrink. "It worked," the team cheered. The man from management gave a thumbs up. Good job. Now just 999 more memes to close it up for good. The crew united like never before. Crew members from different species laughed together, creating absurd memes. A scientist posted a photo of a black hole with the caption, "Cosmic Diet, swallowing stars since forever." Another created a video of a cat playing the keyboard, with "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" playing in the background. Each meme was a small victory against the uncontrolled chaos. However, the portal resisted. "We need something bigger," HFY said, looking at the man from management. He nodded. "It's time for the meme-ocalypse." With a dramatic gesture, he opened a top-secret file, a video of a cat dancing with an alien, to the tune of "I Will Survive." "This," he said, "is the ultimate weapon." The video was launched into the portal, and a wave of light and laughter swept through the place. The cosmic fissure snapped shut, leaving only a light breeze of cotton candy. "Mission accomplished," the man said, serving more coffee. Dr. Zeal looked up at the now clear sky. "So this is how Earth maintains balance? With jokes?" The man nodded. "And waffles. Don't underestimate the power of waffles." Before they left, he handed each of them a badge reading, "Agent of Management." Take this as a memento, and remember, the universe is a funny place. Don't take it too seriously. The fleet took off, leaving Nebraska behind but carrying with them a new perspective. As they traveled, a final message appeared on the screens. Chaos is necessary, laughter is essential, and waffles, mandatory. Earth, now recognized as the epicenter of cosmic balance, continued its journey through space-time as it always had, with chaos, laughter, and a touch of absurdity. As the Galactic Council fleet departed, the man from management watched the horizon, his coffee eternally hot shimmering under the setting sun. "They understood," he murmured, as if speaking to the universe itself. "But will the rest of the galaxy understand?" In space, Dr. Zeal and HFY debated the future. "We need to share what we've learned," said the archaeologist, holding his Agent of Management badge. "But how do we explain that memes and waffles are the key to universal stability?" Dr. Zeal laughed, a sound still strange coming from a plasma being. "Maybe we don't need to explain. Maybe we just need to show." And so the fleet embarked on a new mission, to spread necessary chaos. On every planet, at every space station, they left a piece of Earth. Memes were projected into alien atmospheres. Waffles were served at diplomatic meetings, and cat videos were broadcast on interstellar frequencies. The galaxy, accustomed to the rigid order of the Council, began to change. On Jupiter, the Great Red Spot now formed funny patterns when someone told a joke. On Mars, colonists created the first interplanetary waffle house, serving coffee that never got cold. Even on Pluto, who still considered itself a planet, memes were used to warm the frozen hearts of its inhabitants. However, not everyone accepted the new order. Some species, clinging to the rigidity of the past, resisted. "This is anarchy," shouted a senator from the Galactic Council during a meeting. Dr. Zeal, now a defender of chaos, replied, "No, it's life." And to prove his point, he showed a video of a cat trying to catch a laser beam. The entire room erupted in laughter, and the senator, reluctantly, yielded. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity continued its peculiar existence. Wars, crises, and disasters still occurred, but now they were seen in a new light. "Just another day in the cosmic office," they said, posting memes of cats in spacesuits. The idea that the planet was a barrier to the multiverse spread, but as everything on Earth, it quickly transformed into a joke. The man from management became a legend. His Waffle House in Nebraska turned into a pilgrimage site where aliens and humans gathered to share stories and, of course, waffles. His badge, now shining with the title Guardian of Chaos, became a symbol of hope and hot coffee. But the universe, as always, kept secrets. In a distant region of the galaxy, a new threat was emerging. A civilization that did not laugh, did not play, and saw chaos as a disease to be eradicated. "They are the opposite of Earth," HFY whispered, studying the data. Dr. Zeal looked toward the starlit horizon. Then it's our mission to show them the power of a good meme. The fleet set off once more, this time toward the unknown. As they traveled, a message flickered on the screens. Chaos is necessary. Laughter is essential. And Earth. It will always be the heart of the multiverse. Earth continued to spin in its orbit, a tiny blue dot full of mysteries, waffles, and memes that kept the multiverse in balance. But what about you? What do you think will happen when the next interplanetary empire decides to challenge the galactic warning? Will they learn to laugh at chaos, or will they be consumed by it? If you enjoyed this adventure, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because, in the end, the universe is full of stories just waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss any of them. After all, who knows what the next meme might be that saves reality? So, what are you waiting for? Click, watch, and remember, chaos is necessary, laughter is essential, and waffles, well, waffles are a must.